Hello, everybody. So that's a jingle. Can I start? Can you hear me well? Because, to be honest, I cannot hear myself too well. All right, great. Generally, I am ex-farmer, entrepreneur, current, and also a strategist. And I work with the scenarios of the future, and this is what I would like to talk about for the next 30 minutes. Who would like to know the future of health tech, please? Well, me too. And I have two or maybe three news. One bad. Nobody would tell you what the future of health tech is, because the future is unpredictable. And the second good thing I'm going to talk about is that there is a methodology, there is an algorithm to think about the future and to kind of like imagine this, anticipate this. And for startup, this is the crucial thing. And okay, so let's start, and the plan is like this. For the next 30 minutes, first 15, I'm going to talk about this algorithm, and hopefully it will inspire you how to think about the future of health tech. And for those of you who will stay with me and not fall asleep, I will show some unique research done by myself before the Infoshare conference with a bit of more examples or a case how to think about the future of health tech using this algorithm I'm going to show you in the next 15 minutes. Okay, so now the boring stuff. However, it might be very interesting. May you have any questions, then please ask me meantime, then maybe, well, there are not too many of us, okay? Well, we know that. We live in turbulent times. And what is important here, that right now the businesses are kind of like merging. The newcomers are coming from different directions. Generally, it's very difficult to anticipate the future. It's very difficult to make a strategy. You are startuppers, right? Who thinks that it's valid to have a strategy, meaning a goal and a plan how to get there? Okay, there's one. Well, it's difficult, but it's still important to see what the future might look like. It doesn't have to be linear, I will show you, but you have to think about it. So it's now very, very difficult. All the newcomers are coming. The technology is changing the thing. So the challenge is how to deal with the future that is uncertain. And what we do as a startup is generally, we think about the futures that we perceive as desired, not the ones that are probable, not the ones that are possible. And I will show you in a really simple steps what is like making scenario and how to think in scenarios, because this is very intuitive to our brains, because our brains differ from animals in a way that we are anticipating the future. So this is like a kind of like, not everybody can do it. Everybody can do a scenario, okay? So generally scenarios about this darker circle, the future that is possible to come. And when you think about scenarios, you say, well, what is she talking about? Is she going to predict the future or forecast the future? No, forecasts are different from scenarios. Forecasts based on a data that are from the past. And when we're talking about possible future, we have to grab the bigger picture. Okay, let's go further. So generally, strategies, and especially the one of the players that you would like to talk to, so the pharma companies, the tech companies, they kind of like embrace three ways. One of them, which is very characteristic to startups, and they end with this, is what I want, what I see as a probable future, right? AI will be the big topic in the healthcare, and we will do AI and cognitive computing. Then the other perception is what is really going to happen, what is possible. And the next thing is what we can really do. And this formulates a kind of viable strategy for exit or for investment. And even if you're a startup, you cannot afford not to think about the future, not to kind of to anticipate this, because you will spend the next 3-4 years trying to develop an idea that kind of need to defend itself in the future world, and you kind of assume what it's going to look like. Okay, let's go deeper with this algorithm. So generally, and that's probably the last one from this boring stuff about the introduction. If you think about the startup, it's the inner world. Generally, what we think is about the new world arena. These are competitors, these are players, these are industry trends. But we forget the contextual environment, because from there come the driving forces. Here in the contextual environments, here are the mega trends. Here are the things, if they converge with the trends from the industry, they will disrupt the future. What is in the contextual environment, for example? This is the political, economic, social, our lifestyles, legislation, maybe not on the industry level, but it's coming down. And I will show you that for the health tech, so don't worry. Right now we're talking about the main assumption of the method. Okay, so generally that's it. This is how the scenarios are made of the future. And if there is anything about this algorithm I would like you to remember, it's this slide, okay? So we kind of identify, and not we as my company, everybody's doing scenarios. Google is doing scenarios, IBM is doing scenarios. Tech companies, name the one that is not doing scenarios. I have not seen good scenarios in healthcare, which really bothers me a lot. And what they are doing, this method, is they try to get at the bunch of the list of factors from this contextual environments, as I told you, that it's very seldom forgotten, and from this operational environment that will have an impact on the future of healthcare, for example, in 2022. And we list them. And what is important in this methodology, and this is the only thing that I want you to remember, is that trends are certain. It's the uncertainties that define the future. So once you know and you can understand the trends and what is uncertain about the future, then you can really create scenarios. And scenario, I don't mean one scenario. I don't mean official best case, worst case scenario. No, these are not 3 scenarios, this is 1 scenario. I mean about alternative scenarios of the future, at least 4 of them, 4 different, 4 equally probable. And the idea is how to find your investment, your startup idea, and how is it defendable in each one of them. Okay, so generally, are you following still? I know it's a bit, might be tricky, but this is kind of the heart of this algorithm of thinking about the future and anticipating the future. So generally, the scenarios are the histories of the future. I will show you the way I was thinking about the future of health tech. Hope that you find it inspiring. And what is important to remember, they are not forecasts. We do not predict the future. We try to anticipate the future and based on uncertainties, not trends, because trends are certain. Okay, we talked about that. Case, now you see. On an IBM, this is maybe this is not the book case for scenario, because the book case for scenario planning is the shell scenario. It's how the military approach, because scenarios were used by the military, of course, was brought in a business. It was by Shell in 1960s. However, we'll talk about IBM because it's a more tech scenario. So you will see how they look like, because I am trying to refrain not to show this cross, but we're talking about scenario cross here. So generally, the IBM, we're talking about the 80s, everybody knows the history. It's, of course, very simple to talk about the history, but imagine that you're an analytic or, I don't know, marketing in IBM, and you're doing a forecast. You're kind of trying to predict how many computers we will sell. And they have made a forecast that they will sell 300,000 PCs. The market turned out to be 100 times as big as the forecast. They missed the opportunity. They kind of like blew it, I'm sorry. I mean, they still very well recovered right now, and they're still, a different company. But how is it that they lost it? So here comes the forecast, forecast. This is what we do even at a startup. You're kind of like trying to predict best case, official, worst case. And they did this for PC computers. And here comes the scenarios. Generally, they stayed, and they kind of neglected the two axes that defined the future and were very different of their perception of the world. They assumed that the world is going to go in that quarter, meaning that it's going to be centralized, mainframe, and computers will be used for professional use. They did not see what was coming in the totally different part of the scenarios, which was consumer user-friendly and decentralized and dependent structure. That was totally unimaginable for engineers to see. Of course, it's easy to do a scenario once we have historical data, but this is generally the scenario cross I am talking about. These are alternative futures, the futures that can embrace the different paradigm, the different approach, not only based on historical data. Okay, and now I will stop boring you because probably most of you are like looking at the smartphones. I know it's hard. I try to make it simple, but then let's look. In my approach, I have done some preparation for an Infoshare. I have done a small survey. Hopefully, if you're interested, you will make it better. And now let's see how this methodology can be applied in seeing the future of health tech, okay? The future, where we right now, the future is kind of like laying behind a bit, right? I don't know if that was what the speaker said because I was at the other room. Comparing to all the sectors, we are still like in the pen and pencil era, well, not talking about Poland, but in many of the countries. However, what is certain, it's not only tax and death, that the cost of healthcare are rising, right? Well, duh. And what can be the future of health tech since the revolution they're saying it has already begun? We have seen the big investment within the last 2 years, I guess, in healthcare startups. There is a lot of things going on in European health system trying to be interconnected. But how to look at this very different and complicated framework? I tried to, preparing to Infoshare, I tried to like grab it. And this is what I got. And I said, well, I tried to see how many, since I'm ex-pharma, this is one of the circles, as you can see. But okay, when I think about year 2022, okay, to make it simple, 5 years from now in Europe, okay, who would be interested in entering the health tech? Well, pharma, obviously, they are there. Well, healthcare providers, hospitals, healthcare professionals, well, they are there. Employees, well, of course, this is a lot of things happening right now here because they are really getting new money to the system. There's insurance, and these are all the kind of like traditional value chain. But what about the new one? As you can see, I have made the technology circle the main one, because this is generally how it can be. It doesn't have to be like this, but they are very interested in getting into that because they got technology, they got knowledge, they got people, they got data. And are there any other sectors? Oh yes, they are. There are many others. I just planned them, a couple of them. It's, for example, FMCG, food. This is topics that are directly connected with healthcare. And as you know, the definition of health is changing. It's not about being not sick anymore. It's about being well. So it connects with health, diagnostics, treatment, monitoring. It's about what you eat. It's about how you exercise. So generally, when we think about the future, we could expect the commerce coming into the health tech sector from at least these circles, if not many others. As I told you, it was a small survey. I would love to make it a big analysis, but this is at least something tangible. What we know about healthcare, okay, there are certain trends, like telehealth, this telemedicine, mobile health is booming. There are like, I didn't know that there are so many applications. There are 100,050 applications in health. Well, how can you like manage through them? There are like so many. So if we think about what we're having right now, because right now we are here, we're not talking about the future, what can be future in 2022? Okay, we know that especially in Europe, the electronic health records are being digitalized. It's a fragmented landscape, so in each country, in a different time. However, okay, if we're talking about the future in 2022, it might be, and there are some predictions, that this system might work already pretty well, and they kind of like be interconnected with each other. What are certain trends? Wireless health, all the sensors, getting data about consumers. So these are like top ones, right? This is what the investors are already investing in. But as you remember, we're talking about the future. So these are the trends. These are not the uncertainties. If the uncertainties create the future, so the question is, what are the uncertainties about the future of health tech? So I know it sounds terrible. I mean, it looks terrible, it looks complicated, but these are generally, I try to remember this outer segment. I try to gather all the factors that might have an influence on the future of healthcare in 2022. And for me, the most interesting ones were not the healthcare operational environment, so very close things that are happening. The most important thing which might create disruption in this industrial, slowly changing sector is the outside world. And this is what I came up to. I mean, this is the kind of like first brainstorm list from the survey. From the survey, there are, of course, when people were talking about this, the factors that will influence the future of health tech in Europe in 2022, they list all these trends and tech trends. Of course they did. And they're like, probably you've heard about them, right? The one uncertainty that is really bothering everybody is the pace in which these technologies will enter the healthcare and the value that they will bring to the consumer. They are the two main things. Nobody knows that. I mean, it's still at the early stage, kind of. So I kind of asked them to go to that outer sector, to that outer layer of this onion, as I call it, and say, okay, guys, list me the factors that in your case, and these are the experts, these are tech experts, health experts, startup experts, list me the factors that will for sure have impact for the future of healthcare, health tech in 2022 in Europe. And this is when it started to get interesting. And I would really like to make it bigger one, to make a platform. These are the factors. These are trends and uncertainties put on the same list. What kind of like struck me is that number one, the willingness to share personal and health data was identified as one of the key things that will shape the future of health tech. The other thing from the consumer perspective, trust in health tech solutions is a key thing if some of the technology will go and will be accepted or not. As you can see, and now I will try to make it much more, for you, more visualized, we put those factors into a matrix, kind of judging the impact on the future of health tech in 2022 and judging the uncertainty. And as you can see, in your case, right upper corner, there are all uncertainties. So generally, these are the things, as I told you, that if you learn to think about the future, learn to differentiate uncertainties from trends, because trends will be in each of these 4 scenarios. Uncertainties will be the one that will really affect the future. So there are many things that are judged to be uncertain. Willingness to share the data, financial model of the health tech, because we know that the costs are rising, but the money is not there yet. I mean, it's getting probably from the consumer pocket, but then the models might be, if something comes up really interesting in the financing model of healthcare, it might be very disruptive. The other thing that is very uncertain, is very important, is who will be the integrator of the data. Who will own the data? Who will be the one that will, if the data will be scarce, will charge for the data of the consumers? If, for example, each AI startup I talked about, they're very excited about using AI in healthcare, right? But they said, well, there's one thing. We need data. We need more data to feed our machines with, to make them learn. Okay? So this is it seems like this is the one of key things that will shape the future, the near future of health tech, at least in Europe in 2022. Of course, there are certain things, like, for example, EU regulations. You heard about this data protection rules that are coming in May in 2018. They are the big change. There are medical devices. It's all about the safety and traceability. But this will create upper costs for the startups. It will make it harder. However, if you are in a startup and you are planning a medical device and you will cross this path, that's a torture test that will keep you alive later on. Okay, so of course we have only half an hour. I don't have time to go through all the topics, but the reason I wanted to show you is that I have chosen the uncertainties that were for me the most critical. And one of them is the willingness to share the data. I mean, remember what happened on last Friday when it comes to NHS system, and not only one, the hacker attack? What happened to the data of patients? Maybe this will not, such events will not change the future, but they might change our willingness to share the data, especially if they're about, I don't know, our mental health. I wouldn't like anybody or for example, some health WikiLeaks will publish the list of politicians that have mental illness. Oops, that's the bad thing. This generally helped me to choose, and I have done some scenario cross. This is a prototype, so treat it as an inspiration, right? But just to show you the way of thinking, if we are to choose 2 main uncertainties that might have an influence on the future of health tech, in my first prototype, I have chosen these 2. So the medical data availability, it can be either high or restricted, and the way we choose and we trust the consumerized health tech or the public health tech, and see how many different words are here. Imagine what happened if we have high quantity of data, so everybody is there. You can have cross the data from food, from fitness, from health, because institutions are putting this. Then we have really a scenario, paradise. This is the scenario one. What about if the data is restricted? That only the few, that the ones that are already there, will have a limit to the data. So generally, I know we are closing up, right? This is an inspiration, treat it as like this. Hope I showed you the approach that I'm using. I would love to make a research more ground, and so if anybody is interested, then please let me know. The one takeaway that I would, or a couple of them, that I would like to leave you with is the last one. Data, 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 data. There are so many startups that don't think about it. This is, for me, it's, I don't know, at least in Poland, that came up with these medical devices ideas, and they forget about the data. This is the gold we're talking about. Gather the data, and make the knowledge out of it, make the algorithm super, but gather the data. And of course, try to think in uncertainties, not about trends. Dare to ask the questions, and if you want to know more, I'm here to help. Thank you very much. It's always to know, to be able to create the future and try to imagine where the puck will be and not where it was. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Maybe you have some questions you would like to ask.
I know it's a lot. Somebody, yes.
No, you have this one.
Yeah.
Who is your end customer, and what is your commercial traction? So what have you achieved so far, results-wise?
Meaning from the scenarios of the future point of view, or as an entrepreneur?
No. Have you sold anything as a company yet? And what traction do you have on the market? Meaning, how much have you sold, or what are your projected sales?
Okay, as I said, I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm prototyping a startup that it's in the area that really passionates me. It's in the neuroscience and with some technology sent in it. So it's prototyping. I have not said it yet. However, when I left pharma for the 8 years, I have been working with the scenarios of the future, and generally we are selling this, if you want that sales data, to middle-sized companies, to venture funds that want us to do some kind of future strategic psychotherapy for the startups. So hope this answers for the questions about the target groups. Okay, any more? If anybody wants to know more or wants to have these results, then please send me an email or grab me afterwards. I will give you my email. Okay? Yes?
Based on your analysis, do you envision that some sectors, some players might disappear in the future?
Well, as you notice, I have done this analysis for 5 years, just like to give you the idea. Within that time, I don't think, that competitive landscape will change so much that, somebody will disappear from the old incumbents. They are strong. They're like pharma is strong. They got lots of money. Maybe some medical device producers that they cannot get to the regulations. The regulations are coming in 2019. And there's going to be forcing these companies to really list the products and really decide which one they are staying on the market, because it's going to cost a lot to keep them. So maybe these companies will be endangered. But generally, the sector is kind of maybe not disappearing. I would rather, think about who will appear. Maybe some food tech merging with pharma, maybe some tech merging with healthcare, maybe some public-private partnerships that are here, but they're not still done well. So I would rather think about who's common there. Maybe some Uber of the healthcare in a kind of epidemiology style in emerging markets. We'll see. But there are a couple of opportunities there, and this is generally what you do after creating a scenario. You think about implications for your business. You think about opportunities. You think about strategic implications. Okay, any more questions?
The last question, please, if you have.
Okay,
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much for the presentation.
thank you.